Trying to figure out why I'm not on the screen here. Ah, there it is. Okay. I call the meeting to order, and Tiffany, if you take roll call, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, Brittany Dialaconte, Michael Bean,
Here.
Jonathan Hayes, Carla Berg,
Here.
Terry Dillon,
Here.
Adam Jenkins,
Here.
Jenna McCauley,
Here.
and Eric Adams.
Here.
And just a note that Joe Pishneri and Barry Lind are excused absences tonight.
Did everybody have a chance to read the minutes? I did on page 3 find one error we should probably correct. It's right up at the top under C, number 2.
Okay,
It's Counselor Pishneri's notes. It should say were shared on the screen, not where.
oh, okay.
That's the only thing I saw. I don't know if anybody else did. If not, if we could have a motion as to approval of the minutes.
I so move.
Second. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is business from the audience. And public testimony will be received during business from the audience. As a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. The committee will listen to your comments, but will not respond to public comment until the committee response portion of the meeting agenda. Meeting minutes will be taken by staff and forwarded to the city manager and city council. Members of the public can, members of the public can always send written testimony to the committee or city council. To begin our meeting tonight, I would ask members of the audience to please keep yourselves on mute until you're called to provide public testimony. Public testimony will allow speakers 2 minutes each for a total of 20 minutes. If you're joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either of those times, please use the raise hand feature to make the request. You'll be called on when it's your turn to speak. Please identify your name, Springfield ward number, and the subject you would like to speak about. For people calling in by phone only, you're in listen mode only and cannot be called upon. At the end of the statements, we'll go from there.
Okay, it looks like we have a couple people that would like to speak tonight. The first one I see is a Jay Smith. Jay, I'm going to allow you to talk and then, or turn it on so that you can talk. And I will start the timer when you begin.
Hi, my name is Jay Smith. I'm reading a comment for Amanda Becker-Hensky, who can't be here today. These are her words. Quote, I have been a registered voter in Lane County since I moved here since 2015. I have been in the medical field for 20 years. I have volunteered for medic outreach for 10 years, both in Oregon and California. I'm a lead medic for Street Medics Eugene, a group of volunteers from Lane County that do outreach with houseless, BIPOC, and LGBTQIA events and direct actions. When Roe versus Wade was overturned, there was a call out for direct action support. Being that this is my direct community, I geared up with my eyewash canister and medic pack and went to Dove Medical. I was clearly a medic and stayed back from the protesters. I followed all EPD orders and even directed traffic to keep the flow of traffic going without EPD's help or assistance. When there was a male presenting person armed with an AR, EPD did nothing to secure the person for the safety of the unarmed crowd. In fact, they stated they were more worried about the unarmed crowd than the man with a loaded gun. When SPD showed up, the tension rose for everyone. EPD demanded everyone get to the sidewalk. I was already there, as were most of my comrades. And SPD began a forced line towards Dove Medical. I stayed on the sidewalk as per EPD's orders. I was brutalized with the end of a baton by Officer Bragg. He struck me 3 times with the end of his baton in my chest because I was on the sidewalk. He broke my eyewash canister when he kicked it repeatedly into another person behind me. They continued to brutalize protesters with no provoking and just acted like a goon squad, out for blood to silence and hurt people standing up for their rights. Another medic was shot at point blank with less than lethal ammunition in the stomach and had huge welts and abdominal pain for weeks after. I asked the board to re-examine the funding for SPD and EPD as they, like all police, are abusing the public and causing more damage to people. Defund police, fund houseless outreach and mental health instead. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, and we have one more person that would like to speak, Elizabeth Utterback. Elizabeth, I'm going to unmute you and I will start the timer.
Thank you. This is Lizzie Utterback from Ward 3. This past week, the Black Unity activists have been in my heart as we pass the 2-year anniversary of the Thurston protest for Black lives. That protest ended in police brutality, violence, and racism at the hands of both SPD and local white supremacists who were shown on tape to be working together. You may think things have changed because we have a new police chief now. I understand that feeling and I was hopeful too, but we're all very wrong. Evidence of this came in late June at a peaceful protest I attended in Eugene following the Supreme Court's decision. I want to tell you what happened to me. After a few hours of peaceful protest, SPD showed up walking down 11th Street in combat formation wearing full riot gear. SPD immediately engaged in acts of brutality and violence while completely ignoring a counter-protester who was armed with an assault weapon. While standing on the sidewalk, Officer Amundsen yelled at me to get back, despite EPD's verbal instructions on the LRAD telling us to remain on the sidewalk. While he was yelling at me, I kept thinking about 2 years ago when he beat up Tyshawn and punched a mother directly in the face. If I followed his instructions and stepped back, I'd be in the street and risk arrest. If I didn't move, I risked being battered by him given his menacing baton use. Then there's Officer Bragg, who you heard. He was captured on video that night beating up a medic while her hands were in the air. Protesters experienced significant injuries at the hands of SPD officers that night. Why the decision to send these known violent officers is beyond me. Lieutenant Crawley, is there an internal use of force investigation being conducted regarding SPD's violent behavior at this protest? And have the recommendations from Rick Brazil, which cost the city about 30 grand, already been implemented? To the rest of the committee, best wishes with your ambassador outreach efforts. Without immediate significant improvements, you sure have your work cut out for you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next is committee response, and I invite committee members to share their response. I hear no response at this time. Okay, so we wanted to put Mary Bridget Smith in.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I
Michael.
was having some muting difficulties. So I couldn't jump in there. Who is the Amanda Becker read the first report on behalf of another person? Is that correct?
That was my understanding. It was a J. Smith and she was reading it for someone else.
And that someone else, I was just trying to get the name right, since the second person is the one who wrote the.
Michael, I wrote down Amanda Becker Hensky.
Hensky.
Thank you, Jenna.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, Mary, would you like to go?
Sure. So thanks for taking this item out of agenda order. I'll just introduce myself briefly and then let you know what I plan to speak about today. I'm Mary Bridget Smith. I'm the city's attorney. And I had meant to come here earlier in the year, but had some schedule conflicts and some COVID in the family, and so missed the last 2 meetings. But I'm here to talk to you a little bit about, and just wanted to make sure you guys can all hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm not getting the like waving, you know, like you're muted or anything, so I'll just keep going. So when I was talking to Jessica a few months ago, she said there are some questions about public outreach and from the committee in terms of what would be appropriate to talk about or places that would be appropriate to speak. So I'm really here to answer any questions if people do have questions about that. And I thought what I would do is just kind of talk a little bit about some of the things to keep in mind as a public official and appointed person for a council committee. And then if that sparks any conversations or questions, I'm definitely happy to answer any questions or chat with you. And then if I don't know the answer, I can always find out and then report back. So as part of the SPAC is a council committee. You know, I think the things to think about when you're out and about in the public and people are asking you about whether you're on the committee or something related to your service here is just to really keep in mind and keep straight when you're talking about your position as a SPAC member and then your opinions as an individual. So, and particularly think about that with social media to make clear when you're speaking on your own behalf and to be clear that you're doing that and not necessarily that of SPAC or the council. In the council operating policies and procedures, there are some rules. They're not things that you're going to come up with very often. You know, for example, committee members aren't supposed to lobby to other elected bodies on behalf of the council or SPAC unless the council is aware of that and it's a coordinated effort. So something to think about. It's definitely not something you would come up with all the time, you know, come interact with all the time. And then the other thing to think about is as we get to the fall, there's a police levy this fall. As a SPAC member, you are prohibited from political activities on behalf of that levy, just like a staff member is. So what that means is you need to provide neutral information about the levy. If someone has questions, I would recommend you just direct them back to SPD staff. Like Tiffany or someone who's working on the issue, and then they can get information out to people. And then if you're speaking about the levy, you know, just make sure you're doing it in conjunction with other staff members. So you have someone else there should something come up. So that may come up a little bit this fall because of the levy, but that's not something that, you know, that's every 5 years. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but it could be an issue this year. So I don't have a lot of other information to share. I can talk more about things in more detail if you guys have specific questions, but it's really just a chance to get to see you guys again. Thank you on behalf of the council and see if you have questions about speaking out in the public or questions that you may get from folks.
Anybody have any questions that they'd like answered or clarified? Michael?
I hate to be the same old guy. The questions were quite long and thorough. We were trying to help identify our purpose. And one of the recommendations from at least the public and some of the other surveys is for a more robust, I think, police commission, which we're SPAC. And so as we were setting goals, and the ones who really worked, well, Jenna's here, worked earnestly on it, is that we would go out and meet and dialogue with the public. Now, whether that's appropriate for us in our role, because what we're going to hear is probably things that we can't really respond to or act about. So should we be going out and doing that, or is it okay to go out and do that? And so you want to jump in, Jenna?
Yeah, I think I'm going to try and summarize on Brittany's behalf, and
Okay.
so hopefully I'll capture what I think she was after. When we originally had that discussion, and I know that Terry and Eric have done some additional great work on goals, the conversation was less about necessarily that two-way piece, but creating an opening. So if a SPAC member knew that we were going to be reviewing police policy on bicycle accidents, for example, could we then reach out to the bicycle and pedestrian committee and let them know, hey, here's the policy that we'll be discussing. Are there items on this that you would like us to bring back to the SPAC? I think it was what our goal was. And we were just looking for clarity on what that looks like. So when is it an information share and how best to set that up? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think taking Jenna's question first, and then I'll respond to Michael's, and then Ms. Berg, I can, unless, do you have something specific about that question or another or new issue?
It wraps into all of that. Part of it was, I was one of the people that was like, there was some conversation around as SPAC members, like there seemed to be people on the council who were like, it is not your job to go talk to the public. Where some of us were like, but when there are things that almost to what Jenna was saying, like when there's stuff up, would it be appropriate, like if I was talking to my neighbor, to be like, hey, I'm on the SPAC, what do you think about this? So that I can bring my ward's voice to this, which I think also folds exactly into like we have this public comment, and then, but I'm afraid to respond to it because I don't know my role. I don't know how I would respond on it. And this is, we have them every time we have a meeting, but I always don't respond because I don't know what I'm allowed to respond to. I'm not even sure I'm allowed to be like, we hear you, like whatever, regardless of what is said. So that's kind of what I was hoping that you would kind of give some clarity to.
Okay, those are fair questions. So I think what I would say, kind of working backwards to Carla's question about, what, so I'd say specifically talking about, let's say your neighbors or people that to say, hey, I'm on the SPAC and we're looking at this stuff. What do you think? I think that's totally appropriate to do. I think that if you get into a conversation, there's some back and forth, you'll want to be clear about what's your personal opinion and what's the city's position on something, let's say, especially if those are, be clear about what you think personally, and maybe if the city has a specific position about some matter that's related to what you're talking about. But I think that's easy enough to do. And it would make sense to me that if you are a member of a committee that's meant to take in public input about a city service, that you can talk about it out in the public. I think probably that my understanding, I think of the concern would be more like SPAC members, without coordination with the police department or the council, going out and having organized meetings or organized interactions with folks that is not something that I don't want to say city sponsored, but something that the city wouldn't be aware of. I think that's the concern. But certainly if people are going to know that you're on this committee, right? I mean, your neighbors or somebody, and you can talk about that with them. I think that's totally appropriate. And particularly they might have some insight that you would be like, whoa, I should bring that back. And people would know about that and you can talk about it. Totally fine. So I think that's okay. Does that answer your question in that way? Okay. Then looking at Jenna's question about, so let's say you guys are looking at a policy or an issue that's sort of related to maybe another city service or another city department. Could you reach out to the BPAC and say, hey, we're looking at this policy on X, Y, and Z? I think that makes sense. What I would recommend though, is that you work through the staff liaison, just because then they can kind of keep track of it and make sure you get a response or kind of frame it up in a way. And it might be hopefully it would be more efficient. But I think that makes sense to me. I think you're probably going to see some overlap. I could see overlap obviously between police department and bike committee, right? Because there's going to be, that makes sense to me. And I'm sure there's other areas I can't think about right now. Just think about how you do that interaction and that outreach, and work through your liaison is the way I would go, or your council liaison too would be good. And then remind me, Michael, I think your question was more about going out in the public or getting public input, or how to receive public input from folks about the SPAC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let
Let me give you an example also.
Sure.
I'm on the planning commission.
Oh.
where my boundaries there as opposed to SPAC.
What do you mean?
Well, can we go out, let's say I'm on a planning commission and we're reviewing egress ordinance or something.
Yeah.
So we want to go out and talk to people about it.
I think the difference, I would say, actually, I think the planning commission is probably a lot more restrictive because there would be land use laws about public participation that are more restrictive than what you're dealing with, I think, in a committee like a police committee. So again, I think it's appropriate for the SPAC committee to interact with the public. It just needs to be something that's coordinated through the police department and done in conjunction with the police department. That would be my recommendation there. I think it's fine. And, I think it's, it's so, I watch this all the time in public meetings, people come in and they go ahead and do the business from the audience. And then it always feels, I feel empathy for the committee members or the council because it's not always an easy place to respond to what people are talking about, but it doesn't mean we're not hearing it, but it feels strange to have someone, like today we heard some really heartfelt testimony about what people believed. And then it is hard not to feel like you're giving a very clear response or comprehensive response. But I do think it's worth it and okay to say, hey, I want you to know that we hear you with that. I think that's totally fine to say. You're not, saying one way or the other, whether you agree or disagree or their comments are valid. But it is, I will say, it is tricky. I mean, from my perspective of when we have pending litigation or a public meeting, it's just a really hard time to have that back and forth. So I would recommend that you, depending on the situation, that you think about giving a lot of back and forth at these meetings if people are coming for business from the audience and giving you some input. But there's nothing to say that, the police department or the city couldn't follow up with people after, or there may be some other follow-up that's outside of this meeting, that those things can happen. But I can appreciate that feels strange to have someone come in and talk about something and then you guys are just kind of feel like you're just sitting there and not able to do anything. But remember, it is important to have this place where people can speak to things, and this information does get to the council and it does get to the police department. So it is valuable anyway, even though it feels like a really artificial way to talk to folks. So
That was a good answer. My other follow-up is when I was getting feedback from the council, you said coordinate with the police department, which I think is an excellent idea, but they're also saying, no, you need to coordinate with us.
Well, then I can work on that a little bit
Okay.
and assist with that, because we don't need it to be like a 20-person, thing to try and get you to, so we're going to have a little public outreach. I mean, I can assist with that because I regularly meet with the council to talk about what will be on the agenda and maybe clarify that a little bit. So your staff liaison and council liaison can more sort of directly get you in positions where you can hear from folks. And if you have the interest in the availability, I can let them know that too. Okay. All right.
Okay, anything else?
Anything?
All right.
Well, it was good to see you all. I really appreciate it. If you come up with questions or folks who weren't here and they're like, what I really wanted to ask was this, they can contact me here at the city. I'm more than happy to chat with them. It's no problem.
Thanks, Mary. We appreciate your help.
Thank you.
No problem. Good to see you guys.
You too. Take
Thank you.
care.
Take care.
Okay. Lieutenant Crowley, I believe you're up.
Very good. First of all, it's good to see everybody. It's been a little while since I filled in on one of these, so it's nice to see everyone. I think last time I was on, I don't think Ms. Berg or Mr. Jenkins were on the board, so hello to both of you. I'm gonna try to start with, I have a list of things just to kind of go over as far as business from the PD. I'll kind of go with the recent events and then kind of go into upcoming events and then hopefully take the conversation from there. First of all, 2 nights ago, we had our National Night Out events in Springfield. I'd like to think they were pretty successful. We went to 3 different parks in the city, as well as the residences of at least 2 different neighborhood watch block captains. And they had organized events in their lawns, their driveways for people to come over, people who live in their neighborhood. So myself, other command staff, other officers took turns going to Tyson Park Horse Park and Meadow Park. And those were kind of geographically split up around town. So both east and west of town were represented, as well as the central part of town. So I'm sure there's some people out there that wish we came to their park. And there's nothing that says we won't in the future. We only had so many parks to go to and so many people at that time. But we're going to continue that engagement regardless if it's National Night Out or if it's just a walk in the park. We can go out there, and I'm trying to get a friend who's got a shave ice truck to come out to one of the parks one of these nights and help us out, cool everybody down. So that's in the works for the future. I believe since the last time this group met, we had the canine competition in June, first time in a couple of years. That was a really fun, successful event, as it usually is. It's a great opportunity for us to do some outreach, but also show the community what we do, and it gives us an opportunity for people to see police in a little bit different light, competition, training, and just general interaction with kids, with adults, everything that comes along with dogs, which pretty much everybody seems to love in this community. So it's always fun to have that. That went really well. A few weeks after that, we had a Special Olympics torch run. A bunch of us participated. We were originally supposed to run from the police station over to the Serbu youth campus in Eugene, hand the torch off to EPD and let them run from there. This is, of course, a fundraiser for Special Olympics Oregon. In addition to fundraising, it's calling some attention to Special Olympics, which is always near and dear to our hearts as police officers. We do a lot of training with them on different events, and it's fun to actually be part of the medal ceremonies on those. So we ran a bit, and then all the Springfield folks got peer pressure to keep running. So we continued running to Valley River Center with EPD. By the end of the day, most of us had trouble walking because it's a little bit further than we care to run most of the time. But it was fun for on a couple different levels. Obviously, being a community event, it was fun. Running with EPD and having that bond with a nearby agency where we're competitive, we work together, everything all at once. And here we are running down streets and making our way towards Valley River for a very legitimate fundraiser. It was very fun to do. And I know
How many miles was that?
5.5 miles.
All the way. Wow.
Yeah, it's about 5 miles more than I care to run. But like I said, we all planned on stopping and getting a ride back. And then once we got there, everybody kind of peer pressured everybody to keep going. And I've told the story to a few friends so far. And it's actually, I smile every time I tell the story because of that. As you may notice, we had the World Championships in Eugene and a little bit in Springfield last couple of weeks. We had 2 marathons in Springfield, Sunday and Monday. Sunday was a little tricky. Monday was a lot trickier because we have folks trying to go to work. So I worked with a lot of folks in Eugene, and I'll give a lot of credit to our Public Works Department for helping us draft a good plan to get people in and out of the neighborhood that was impacted by the race. There was a good portion of West Springfield that was really surrounded by the course, and if we didn't plan some escape routes for folks, we would have had a lot of people wind up yelling, being pretty mad at us. So we identified intersections. We worked on areas to egress and ingress folks in and out. We had plans for medics to come in and out when they had to respond to medical calls. Everything went really well. I'm sure there were a few people who were impacted and may think otherwise and are upset with the event that took place. But overall, we staffed 26 intersections in Springfield. And we had no incursions on the race with vehicles, with pedestrians, with any issues at all, safety and security wise. And that was my #1 priority. That went well. And in addition to that, our staff worked 178 shifts at the World Championships, and different shifts, each shift being about 8 hours apiece over that 10-day period. And supplemented UVO PD, EPD, FBI, OSP, every other government acronym I can't think of, and keeping that event running smoothly and safely. I'm really, really proud of our folks. We had a few good stories come out of that. One of our sergeants made friends with, I believe I want to say the Argentinian team, Some of them got lost. He made some friends with them. They ended up coming back here, went out to dinner, got a tour of downtown, the police department, and we made some lifelong friends there. That's just one example of a lot of just fun, friendly, good interactions the PD had with folks. That's the recent events. As far as upcoming things, there's a whole slew of things. We are going to have an open house again in September. I think we've identified Saturday, September 24th as that day for the open house. We're working on the details of that now, how to make that happen, how to make it run efficiently so people get to see the ins and outs of the PD, the vehicles, the people, the equipment, everything we have, and have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with us. Looking forward to that. I believe Chief Shearer may have spoke about this at a previous meeting. So if I'm being repetitive, I apologize. I'll go over it briefly. After the Uvalde, Texas shooting happened, we began to identify how we would respond in a similar scenario. We started locating best practices and procedures around the country for responding to active shooter incidents, active violence response. I'm working on a draft policy, and I'm hoping by the end of this week, by the time Chief gets back next week, we have a good roundtable with command staff about it, and we can push it forward for review for folks like yourself to take a look and see what we're moving forward with as far as our response on an active violence incident. And we train on this stuff, but this is a way to ensure we're all on the same page procedure wise. Make sure everybody excuse me, knows how to respond and what's expected of them. So that should be happening very soon. We're reviewing the Uvalde. It's an incident review that was done down there, and we're trying to learn from that also to where we can have a proper response to a violent incident here in Springfield if it were to happen. And to piggyback on that, we've reached out to the community through our website, through social media, essentially offering businesses, schools, medical clinics, if they would like to learn more about active violence incident response and what they should do. We've done probably 8 to 10 trainings so far, and we have a couple more scheduled this month where we're doing basically a 1 hour-ish outreach to the businesses that have questions about what to do if something were to happen to them. We give them an idea of how they can protect themselves, but also what to expect from a police response if something were to happen. And I've done a couple. Some of our SROs have done a few. Some of our SWAT guys have done a few. We're divvying them up pretty well. So if you know anybody that would like some more information on that, please let me know after this. Reach out to me, shoot me an email, and I'll get you in touch with Lily Wick, who's helping coordinate those future trainings or education times. And then probably almost last but not least, certainly not least, ALICE training. We do this pretty much every year with the school district at the beginning of the school year. Our SROs, along with officers from other nearby agencies who are instructors in ALICE training, which is the run, hide, fight, how to respond to an active shooter threat. That's taking place in a few weeks with our school district. City Hall training is going to be taking place after that. And I believe, and Mr. Adams, please correct me if I'm wrong, if you're aware of this, Willamette Lane reached out to us recently, and we're going to be conducting some training with Willamette Lane, I believe, middle of this month, somewhere in about next 2 weeks with Willamette Lane staff on that type of thing. So other than that, we're working on hiring folks. We're getting an increased interest in jobs for police officers, for detention officers, dispatchers, and records. People are very interested in it. We're getting increased ride-alongs right now. People are coming from other jurisdictions to take a look. We just hired 2 lateral police officers last week, one from a local agency and one from out of state. And we're building back up our forces so we can be a better response for the community and be there for everyone as quickly as possible. So I think that's most of the stuff I was going to talk about. If I think of something else, I'll let you know. Anybody have?
Appreciate it.
I just wanted to say, whoever you put in charge of your social media has just been hitting home runs for the past 2 months. It's unbelievable.
Mhm.
That's Zach Gosa Lewis, and he's done an outstanding job. We stole him from University of Oregon not too long ago. And he's very familiar, he's very savvy with social media. And I'm very happy to have him. He stops by every day and chats with me and gives me ideas about how we can be better at communicating. And we definitely use the help every time.
He's doing great. Does he pick the content? Is he like a ace reporter on top of social media, or?
He collaborates with us. He comes up with a lot of the ideas himself, but he bounces ideas off people. He's definitely not one of those people that thinks he knows it all, and which makes him that much more valuable. Because if he doesn't know, he said, "Hey, how can we fill this in, or how can we share this, or what can you tell me?" And he runs with it, creates it, and puts it out there. The digital media. He works a lot with everybody, all the command staff, and all the specialties, whether it's dogs or SWAT or the school resource folks. There, he works really well with everybody.
Yeah, nicely done.
Thank you. I'll share that with him. Thank you.
Yeah, do please. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Moving along, since we've already had Mary Bridget Smith come in, we'll go to the SPAC goal settings. Now, Joe again is not here, and I know that he had some questions on some of this. Are there any other questions or comments? Do we leave this until Joe shows up?
I would move that we postpone it till everyone's here. We can have a more robust review.
Okay, Eric, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. I guess based on what Mary Bridget shared, I'm perhaps even more confused, less clear on how we go about setting these goals in a way that is not going to create unintended conflict or misrepresent the purpose of our committee as it relates to what city council's expectations are. I mean, I appreciate the guidance that she provided and absolutely agree with what she said in terms of us need to be very conscientious and diligent about the comments that we make as SPAC committee members, as well as citizens, so to speak, in this forum and elsewhere. But it's highlighting for me even more so whether or not we actually have the ability to get out into the community and act as liaisons. And so, yeah, I think having Joe's perspective on that and kind of working through this process along with him would be extremely helpful. I'm also wondering if maybe, not to be presumptuous, but if a session with the full council could be helpful in that regard and helping us determine what our goals should be.
That's a good point, and we can check that out. Thanks, Eric. Lieutenant Crowley, you had your hand up again?
I did. Thanks for seeing. I'm just trying to find that little button at the bottom with the hand raised. Been struggling with that for 2 minutes. There's a couple things on my notes I wanted to make sure I brought up. One of which I believe there were some questions at a prior meeting regarding door-to-door solicitors and how the city and the department was communicating about how we respond to that. So there is information on the city website as well as SPD's website regarding the current list of approved door-to-door solicitors. We put that on there as a courtesy. However, all that is run through Public Works and they go through the licensure approval process of door-to-door solicitors. So if there's some kind of violation or complaint regarding the solicitors not following their rules, those calls should go to the Public Works, to the licensing department over there. However, if there's a safety concern, please call the police. We want to stress that with you and the people you speak with when that question comes up, because we want to be able to respond appropriately, but oftentimes it's not a criminal call, but the information's on both websites. Obviously, the other thing I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention it, the levy, I think it was mentioned earlier, that's why I didn't mention it. Levy coming up in November. I believe the ballot title is supposed to be finalized very soon prior to the your October meeting, is my understanding. They're finalizing the language in the ballot title, as well as there's a restriction of how much language can be underneath the ballot title. I think they're finalizing that as we speak. So, and so I don't get in trouble with Mary Bridget, I won't say a whole lot more about that right now, because I don't want to get in trouble. Also very important, I'm going to check this stuff off. I believe there's upcoming SPAC openings for this committee, and I'm going to send my conversation to Tiffany Monroe here in a minute and let her talk about that or mention what needs to happen so we can get interested parties on the police advisory committee, and also mention the fact that that Tiffany's our new staff liaison for the police advisory committee. I don't know how formal she was introduced before. I've known Tiffany for 23 and a half years. You'll be very happy with how she does this. We're going to miss Jessica, there's no doubt, but we're in good hands with Tiffany running the show here, and I want to make sure I acknowledge her in this meeting. So now I'm done.
Thank you. Yeah, you stole my thunder there. I was going to mention, that's all right. Yeah, welcome, Tiffany. Thank you
you.
for
I
stepping
appreciate
in. And we all did thoroughly enjoy Jessica, and we're very thankful for everything that she provided for us. So we're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Real quickly about the SPAC openings. So they're posted on the city's website. The applications they're currently accepting applications. The applications are due by September 16th. The two positions that are open, one is the local business community representative, Michael Bean's term is over at the end of November. And then the other one is a citizen at large representative, Terry Dillon's term is over at the end of November as well. But Terry, you are eligible for another term, so we encourage you to apply.
Thank you. Okay, someone else had their hand. Carla, was that you that had your hand up?
Eric said most of what I was thinking, so it's all good.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. We're now talking about the policies, and the first one is 2.11. It's geographic boundaries, and it talks about where our police department can do their thing. Has everybody had a chance to read these or look at them? And any questions on this one? Or comments? It's pretty short and to the point, so.
I have a question that maybe it feels a little naive of me, but I think it was the last paragraph says that like all Oregon, federal, all other agencies are kind of welcome to come in and do what they need to do. And it seemed like it was almost without boundary. So is that kind of normal operating procedure, or yeah, the open-endedness of it felt a little broad to me, and I just wanted to check if that's kind of normal, or if there's something else that defines that.
Thank you, Carla. Yes, that is it's a normal thing. Within the state of Oregon, the jurisdiction for every police department in Oregon is essentially the state of Oregon. So while we within that first line restrict our normal day-to-day activities to the Springfield city limits, the state law typically allows us to go to other jurisdictions and make arrests, write tickets. So as a part of reciprocating that, that's acknowledging in the last paragraph that while we can go to LaGrande, Oregon and pull somebody over, the state police or the Eugene police or the sheriff's office have every lawful authority to come into the city of Springfield and do traffic enforcement, make arrests. As a matter of fact, we were this afternoon, I was out on for a while today working with the sheriff's office on a case in which they were in our jurisdiction looking for somebody, and we assisted them. So that's basically the last paragraph is the acknowledgement of how that works within the state of Oregon, according to the Oregon revised statutes. It's different from state to state. I remember the old movies where the cops could only go to the city line. After that, the bad guy got away. That doesn't happen in the state of Oregon, fortunately, and we have a good working relationship with those agencies specifically listed.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And the other policy that we're reviewing is a school resource officer. It was a little longer, more involved. I was kind of surprised that it was so thorough. Anybody else have any comments, questions on it? Yes, Adam.
I guess really my only comment or question is, and maybe it has to do with budgeting and funding, but is there any plans or expectations that we need more SOR officers based on just, I guess, how today's environment is?
Hit my unmute button here. Yes, I'll stop short of saying there are plans, but we've had conversations, us being the police department, with the school district about expanding the program. Right now, it's not as much of a budget issue as a staffing issue. We work with the school district on funding on the budget part of this to fund the position. Right now, we have to have enough officers to make sure we're properly staffing our shifts before we create another specialized position to work in the schools. But as far as the need, I would say we agree with the school district. There is a need to have an additional officer to handle kind of the downtown schools, the alternative schools, and work with that group to where we're serving everybody, not just the two major high schools and the feeder schools in the area. We want to make sure we're having a contact with every child possible to ensure their safety and work with the staff to make sure we're addressing their concerns as well. So I think that's a very near future discussion.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments? Very quiet group tonight. Yeah, Jenna.
I think the only thing that I would add is not directly in the policy. It talks about how there's collaboration around selection, and I just would like to commend the department on behalf of the school district for how they've worked with us in recent selection for officers for these roles. We had parents involved in some of the interview process, students, our school psychologists, our teachers, our staff, our administrators, just across the board. So it was really comprehensive and involved process. And I know that that's has a tendency to be different than the traditional way that officers are selected for roles. And so it has been such a benefit for everybody involved to have that relationship and that experience in even just identifying who will be working with our students on a regular basis. So that part isn't clearly articulated, but the Springfield Police Department has been amazing in having those conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, anything to share with us or about our community, where we live, our neighborhoods? Well, looks like we're all out of here. Oh, sorry, Eric, go ahead, please.
We'll slow on the raised hand button. Just a quick maybe item of interest, if we share, had recently participated in a roundtable through the Oregon Parks and Recreation Association involving several agency partners as well as other governmental staff from county agencies and other law enforcement agencies across the state around kind of a growing issue with abandoned, dilapidated RVs that is not as much of an issue in Springfield right now, but we're starting to see a gradual increase of that within our park system at Willamette Lane. And there's kind of a growing concerted effort across multiple stakeholders to help the legislature potentially develop some new bills that would help regulate and fund the removal and abatement of those as time goes forward. So just wanted to share that. And if you're experiencing any of that in your neighborhoods or within parks near your neighborhoods, please reach out and let me know. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Hey, anybody else? All right, we're going to adjourn at 6:49. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening. And Michael.
I was just saying bye.
Oh, okay.
That's a wave, a real
That's
wave.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.